What's going on, everyone? I'm Jaren, and today we are talking about the 2025 live-action remake, Lilo and Stitch. In this story, we follow a lonely Hawaiian girl who befriends a runaway alien, helping to mend her fragmented family. Now, this marks the sophomore feature-length efforts of Dean Fleischer Camp, the director, writer, and editor of Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. And I did not know he was the talent behind the camera, so it really just brought me back of how much I truly treasure his feature film debut. And I'm gonna be frank, but Disney live-action remakes, they don't do it for me anymore. I mean, I didn't mind watching them at first and maybe probably just going to review them, but after The Lion King, I just didn't bother with them anymore. Maybe Beauty and the Beast was the last good live-action remake that Disney gave us. Maybe Aladdin to a certain degree. Growing up in the state of Hawaii, where Hollywood has painted its own lens of the culture and lifestyle, has been a bit of a challenge, where many talents over the years have tried to break into the industry and shine a much bigger light on how the Pacific could impact cinemas. When Lilo and Stitch got announced, I was both excited, and the other part of me was thinking that it was way too soon to see a retelling for the next generation. And knowing that this movie was going to go straight to streaming was a little bit of alarming, especially when you know that the budget was much lower than the recent releases of Snow White and The Little Mermaid. It is just so much easy to say that the original will always be better, that the remake does just enough to merit its own existence. Is it lazy that the remake is trying to recycle a lot of the things that we loved about the original, or is it an abomination that the remake tries to tell a much different story, make a lot of different changes that is really inspired by the original source material? Despite the heavily divided opinions, I can honestly conclude that this movie was a half measure for me. That when this particular movie tried to retread a lot of the same material from the original, or when they decided to make a lot of drastic changes, it failed. But when it tried to expand upon the characters or key plot points, that genuinely kept my interest. Starting out with the positives, the spirit of aloha and the Hawaiian culture was endearingly present throughout the film. Embracing the setting on the island of Oahu really created the opportunities and new angles for the actors as well as their characters to really test out the terrain and environment. The budget may have been limited to what they wanted to shoot or include in this version, but I think they utilized it to the best of their abilities, including the CGI treatment of Stitch, Pleakley, Jumba, and the Grand Councilwoman. I even was entertained by the contrivances that they decided to give Jumba and Pleakley while they were hunting Stitch throughout the island. Getting into the talent, now I am a little bit disappointed that they kept the actress who played Lilo just very minimalized during the marketing. I mean, doing some of the interviews is one thing, but she's barely even shown in the poster. I mean, it's called Lilo and Stitch. Having said that, I'm kind of glad that they saved her for the viewing experience, because Big Island Ray's Maya Ke Aloha really steals the spotlight from Stitch in all equal measures. She is just so adorable in many ways than one. She is a force to be reckoned with, and instead of taking the more neurodivergent trait that the animated film kind of touched upon Lilo, she is much more of a sweet troublemaker here. She has perfect comedic timing, and even on the more dramatic moments, she really knows how to hit the tender spots on your heartstrings. Kauai Ray's Sydney Elizabeth Agudon plays Nani, and I do think that the internet has been unfair with their opinions with her tackling this role, and honestly, I think she knocks it out of the park. She has really strong screen presence. I really admired the way that the character was written and expanded upon this time around in this version, grounding her in a much more crucial position where she is just forced to make grown-up decisions at her age, including becoming Lilo's legal guardian. The relationship between both sisters are a lot more prevalent, making a lot of the real-world obstacles more poignant, and the love that they have for one another very unique. There's also new characters like David's Tutu and Mrs. Keikoa, played by Amy Hill and Tia Carrere, who add a lot of flavor to this remake, especially Carrere, who has a surprisingly integral role that impacts the story. Billy Magnuson's take on Pleakley was surprisingly amusing, that I almost wanted more screen time with him. And of course, there is no Stitch without the voice talent of Chris Saunders just reprising his role as the lovable and destructive alien. Now, before we move on to my negative opinions, I will be talking about spoilers, so that's really the only way that I'm going to get my point across. That is your warning. For starters, I wish they took the setting back to Hanapepe, the small little town in Kauai, which inspired the original film's backdrop. And there's just something so special about that place, especially because I got to visit it for the first time this past year. And, having to see the entire film done on Oahu just felt like every other movie taking place in Hawaii. And retreading what I said in the beginning, every single time this movie was attempting to recycle the same exact scene, the same lines from the original movie, it really felt empty. And it's only because of the editing choices. And, for example, there's the scene where Nani and LILO were just very upset with one another, screaming at each other after the social worker visits. And the way that they cut it back and forth just felt very messy. It didn't feel cohesive. With the integral supporting role of Tia Carrere as Mrs. Keikoa, the social worker, when Courtney B. Vance comes in as Cobra Bubbles, there was just almost no need to have him in here. I mean, we could have stricken him from the entire story and nothing would have changed. I mean, they even omitted Gantu, and it completely changes the dynamic and the final outcome. Having said that, Zach Galifianakis is the biggest miscasting as Jumba. Now, when he gets into human form, that makes sense, because he's Zach Galifianakis. But the way that his voice comes out of that alien mouth just sounded so wrong. I mean, very wrong. And with Gantu out of the picture, Jumba presumes the position as the main antagonist, which makes the entire third act fall completely apart. Now, the biggest omission, the biggest sin that this movie is responsible for is Stitch not reading and resonating with the story of the Ugly Duckling. Now, that minute detail is the key ingredient to the character learning empathy and compassion, humanizing him as a member of his newly found ohana. And they shortcut that plot point, making a lot of the emotional payoff feel very, very empty and unearned. Overall, I don't hate this movie. I just think they could have done a much better job with their final product. Is it better than the other live-action Disney remakes that have come out? It is absolutely worth the rewatch, and I praise it for its talents and possible efforts. I'm also not a big fan of that ending, but the mid-credit scene that comes up does make up for it in 10 folds. In the end, I do wish we got more of a animated follow-up instead of the live-action treatment. I think it would have been much better, but knowing that this movie is successful and that it's possibly going to be getting a sequel, you can go ahead and count me in. Alright guys, that's all I got to share about that movie. Go ahead and check it out if you want, or wait for it till it goes on streaming. I am Jaren Agbanawag. I want to thank you guys again for taking some time out of your day to hear me talk some movies. Look forward to more reviews, and I'll see you guys at the theater. Take care.